there, and welcome to the Surviving Trauma Stories of Hope podcast. Hosting this podcast has fantastic benefits because I get to meet beautiful people from all over the world. Occasionally, I get to meet a guest that has a profound impact on me. And today, I am thrilled to welcome Rosalind Pistilli to the podcast. Prepare yourself for a very transparent, impactful, and moving account as Rosalind shares her story and how she overcame past childhood traumas. Today, Rosalind is a licensed clinical social worker currently pursuing her doctorate in social work. She has over 11 years in the mental health field, providing therapy to clients going through many of life's transitions, and she strives to assist clients with a treatment plan tailored to their specific needs. She joins me from her home in northern Colorado, where she lives with her family and pets. This conversation will move you and hopefully help you and give you the tools to dive deeper into yourself. Enjoy and keep listening. Hi, Rosalind. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for joining me and for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for inviting me. It's very exciting to participate in these types of programs. I'm very excited to be here.
That's awesome. So how about we kick off and you start by telling the listeners a bit more about yourself?
So I am married. I'm a therapist. I live in Colorado, United States. I'm 44, so I'm well into my middle ages.
That's
well
the best age.
I like to tell people I'm just well seasoned. I know who I am now. I'm firm in my belief of who I am. So.
That's stunning. That is just absolutely awesome. So the show is about hopeful stories, and your story for me is one of absolute human perseverance in the face of extreme adversity. And, if you're ready, we can jump right in and you can share it with the audience.
Yeah, so I was born in California, and my parents were not very good parents. So around the time I was almost 5, both of my parents went to prison, and I went into the foster care system. So it was pretty shocking. Not only did I go into foster care, but I moved from California to northern Wisconsin. So California has probably about mid to high 70s year-round. And northern Wisconsin is like a frozen tundra. It's like below zero very frequently. So it was a huge shock. And then, so I lost my parents and then went into foster care right away. And then spent 4 years in foster care, and I was adopted by my paternal aunt. And they were extremely radical, fundamentalist, religious people. So we were very strictly held. So many things, like we couldn't have My Little Pony because it was of the devil, right? And so there was a lot of fear-based parenting that was happening, and there was a lot of denial of basic things that other kids were enjoying. So we felt very isolated and kind of cut off from the world. And then my parents were extremely abusive. They would beat us regularly. They would deny us food regularly. They would keep us home. I remember them refusing to answer the phone. And for a long time, they just unplugged the phone altogether. And it was like a year and I hadn't heard a phone ring. And so I was standing in the office at the school and the phone rang and I jumped and they were like, "What is wrong with you?"
That's awful.
The state was called on us multiple times. Teachers and pastors and neighbors, they were all reporting this, abuse. But I feel like the state just kind of didn't know what to do with us because we technically belonged to California. And so Wisconsin didn't know what to do with us, and California was like, they're not our problem. They're not in our state anymore. So we were just kind of lost in the sauce. And so
So
my
when you say
parents,
we, did you
yeah,
have siblings that was in foster care and then adopted with you?
yeah, we were three girls, my older sister, myself, and my younger sister. So we were a sibling group. So our parents got out of prison. I was in fourth grade when my mom got out of prison, and I was in sixth grade when my dad got out of prison. Both of them were registered sex offenders, so there wasn't really going to be a chance for them to get us back after that. So then I went to my grandmother's funeral when I was in sixth grade, and my father was there, and that's when he sexually molested me.
And this
Um,
happened at your grandmother's funeral.
yeah, the day before her funeral when we were at my aunt's house. So that created some problems. I was in sixth grade. I was just entering puberty, and so I was pretty messed up from that. And so I would do things like run away from home, and I was really suffering with the anguish of that. And the anguish of feeling like I can't share that with somebody, right? Like, I didn't want to see my father go back to jail. And so I was not handling it well, and I was a very troubled little middle schooler. Um,
Yeah. And tell me,
so
Rosalind, was that the first time that it had happened by the hands of your dad, or did this happen before your parents went to prison?
I think, from my knowledge and recollection, I think that that was the first time my dad had offended against me in that manner. Um, but he had taken pornographic images of me and my sisters when we were young. That's not what he went to jail for, but that was part of it.
Yeah.
But he went to jail for assaulting girls that were around the age I was at my grandmother's funeral. So I believe he probably didn't assault us when we were younger because we weren't quite in that type that he had as a pedophile. So then when I was 14, my adoptive parents sent me down to Florida to live with my biological mother for a while because they couldn't deal with me anymore. And that was
Right.
a very difficult time. My mother was ill-equipped to handle a salty 15-year-old, and her husband was an absolute creeper. And he began sexually assaulting me when I was 16. So then when Florida found out about it, they sent me back up to Wisconsin to finish out my time with my parents. And then when I was 18, I turned 18 in November. My parents stopped getting paid by the state of California in January. And so they met me at the door with a duffel and said, pack your shit and go. So I graduated high school homeless, and then I entered the military, and that's when I kind of launched my life and like started trying to move through my childhood and figure out how my childhood informed who I am as an adult and how I interact with other people. And so I did some therapy at the time that I was in Wisconsin. Um, my parents didn't really believe in therapy, so they they weren't willing to give me the therapy that I really needed. Although the school counselor was very beneficial for me. I could see her without my parents' permission, and that was very helpful. I think
Yes.
that's what really kind of gave me the hope to hold on and hold out. Because I remember in seventh grade just feeling very suicidal and feeling very worthless. And I would like live for my weekly meetings with my school counselor to like be able to just get some of it out and not feel so alone in what I was going through and what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
So So then as an adult, I went in and got some therapy and tried to work through what had happened and what the impact of that was going to be on the rest of my future.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you at any time try to mend your relationships with your biological parents, or wasn't that a desire that you ever had?
Yeah, right now my biological mother is my only surviving parent. She lives in Michigan now, and I have limited contact with her in that, like, obviously she's got some serious problems. In order for her to have gotten where she ended up in life, there has
Yeah.
to be, like, some pretty severe problems. So we have a difficult time navigating that together because I have been through the process of healing from my childhood trauma, but my mother does a lot of trying to deny, right? And she does a lot of hiding. So, like, in the past, when my older sister would hold her accountable for things, she would get upset and call me, and I'm like, look, my sister has a right to her story. When you and my father violated the law and became pedophiles, that became part of our story. And we have a right to ownership of that story. And we have a right to tell that story. And he doesn't necessarily agree with that idea. she
Yeah.
wants us to stay silent on what happened. And because it makes her look bad, and I get that. So I talk to her maybe once or twice a year. She's on my Facebook, so she can see what's going on in my life. She's met my daughter, but it's more at the acquaintance level and less like a parental level, her involvement in my life.
Yeah.
And then all of my other parents have passed on. So both of my adoptive parents have passed, and my biological father passed years, like 1998, like years ago.
Yes. I mean, if we think about, and you touched on it, on some of the tools that was available to you during your childhood and your young adolescent years, which was the counselor at the school, was there any other tools that you used at that time to cope as a child and a young adult?
Yeah, I did, and I still have a very strong connection with my higher power, who I identify as. And growing up in kind of a very super strict religious background, I did reject the idea of religion for a moment, and that was like my mid-20s. I was like, I'm mad at God, and that's it. But
Yeah.
I really feel like my faith and my belief in the fact that there was somebody out there, even though I could not touch or see them, there was somebody out there that cared. And then just the hope that this was going to go away, right? Like I was going to be able to survive this environment, and then I would be able to get out and make my life what I wanted it to be. And I just clung to that belief system.
Yes.
Like I was like, my bad day survival rate is 100% so far.
Yeah.
And so like I just kept clinging to that to just be like, one day I'll get out. And so I really kind of focused. Well, I think I was 12 when my parents told me that I would basically graduate high school homeless. They were like, once the state stops paying for you, you're out of here. So,
That must have been hard to hear. I mean, as a 12-year-old to already be faced with the idea that in 6 years' time you are homeless.
yeah. And I mean, like, it really created some problems. I became like an insomniac. I would stay up at night trying to figure out how I'm going to get the money for an apartment, and how much is electricity, and how do you do these things, and how do you navigate this system. And I think the most traumatizing part, I mean, like, we can talk about certain events that happened that were traumatizing, but I think the thing that did the most damage was the feeling of being alone. You know, like,
Yes.
I knew I didn't have anybody.
Right.
It was very difficult.
Yeah.
And even my sisters, who, you know, we were kind of going through this together, we started to feel like we can't rely on each other because we're going to have to figure out how to take care of ourselves.
So there wasn't like the closeness that you would expect something like this would bring, but instead the three of you sort of drifted apart and tried to do it on an individual basis.
Yeah, we kind of had to cut that. We had to just focus on our own survival, and we couldn't focus on each other. We were super tight and super close and very bonded in the fact that we were sharing this trauma event. But it was like, we know that we have to figure out how to meet our own needs. I wasn't going to be able to move in with my older sister, and my little sister wasn't going to be able to move in with me. It wasn't going to be a reality that we could stay together for the rest of our lives. And so it became very lonely. Like, I described the loneliness, but then I also just remember the hope that I just remember telling myself at night, just hang on, just hang on, just hang on. Because there was a freedom in knowing that I was going to be kind of cast out. Like, it was like, I'm going to get to the point where I don't owe these people anything, right? Like, I can just, the world is literally going to be my oyster. I can just go out and create my own life, and I don't have to go home. I don't have any obligation to these people because they don't feel any obligation to me.
Yeah.
And so there was this aching loneliness in it, but there was also a little freedom that I found in it, where I was like, I can say ta-ta for now and never come back. I don't ever have to be back in this environment again.
Yeah.
I have gotten good at understanding that when trauma is heard, that's when it starts to heal. And sometimes I have to hear my own trauma to heal it again.
Yes.
I tell people that, like, when they're talking to me, and I get people that talk to me all the time who say things like, how did you even survive your childhood? Or why do you even put up with any people? Like, how did you not run to Alaska and become a hermit and just, like, shut yourself off from society? And I'm like, trauma is like surgery, right? You can get better. You can survive it. There's always going to be a scar, though. It's never going to be, you're never going to be 100% outside of your trauma. You're just going to get to a place where you can say, I'm not responsible for my trauma, and then stop allowing it to impact your day-to-day choices, which was really hard to do. It's not like I turned 18, someone flipped a light switch, and I was like, ta-da, well-adjusted.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Rosalind, I know that you joined the military. I think that was sort of the first job that you had, right? Post your schooling career. Tell us about that. What was military life like?
I joined the U.S. Air Force, and I was actually in Space Command. And so I ran the GPS satellite system, which was really kind of cool. And that was before GPS was released to the public. So that GPS was released to the public, people were like, oh my God, like, we can find the grocery store now. And I was like, yeah, I know. Totally knew about that. Kind of a big deal.
Look, it was a big deal for us. We kept on looking at our old houses that we used to live in to see who's living there now and what are they doing. It was a big deal.
I tell people all the time, I have traveled the world with Google Earth. Like, I've looked at the pyramids, you know what I mean? Like, anytime I'm feeling kind of boxed in, I'm like, where am I going today? And I'll pick somewhere on the map and just look at it from above. It's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I joined the military and I was in the Air Force. So the Air Force is one of the better military branches. And, you know, it's basically like a job with a uniform, where other branches like force you to do like PT all the time and go to all these weird like survival camp and stuff. The Air Force is like, yeah, you're probably going to be running a computer. So I did computers in the Air Force, and then I got out and I had a whole career in computers.
That's awesome.
And then when I was 30, I left the computer field and became a therapist. So
yeah,
it's
and it's
been a
never too
ride.
late. It's never too late to pivot. You know, to just make
No.
that change in your career.
And I get people that say like, "Oh, I'm too old for a career change," and I'm like, "I'm on my second career, honey. You're not going to get that support here."
Yes.
I'm going to tell you to go do it. Go grab that brass ring.
Yeah. So you went back to school because you are so accomplished with all of your qualifications. Tell us about what you studied to become a therapist.
Yeah, so I was the ripe old age of 30, right? And I was like, oh, I'm not where I want to be in my life, which now I know coincides with Saturn returns. I'm glad that I didn't know about Saturn returns when my Saturn returned, because then I probably wouldn't have gone back to school and I wouldn't be where I am. But I was like, time to go back to school. And so literally my daughter was entering kindergarten and I was entering college.
That is literally the cutest thing that I have ever heard.
So yeah, I went to the Ohio State University and got my BA in psychology, and then I went to the University of Akron and got my master's in social work. And then I went and got my certified clinical trauma professional designation.
Congratulations, Rosalind.
I had entered my doctorate program, but I've been on sabbatical from that for so many years now. We might as well just say I dropped out.
No. Same as you're never too old to change a career. You're never too old to finish a degree.
No,
Yeah.
it's always out there for you, and it's always available. And I think that so often we pen ourselves into a box, and we think, and like I tell people all the time, like, I get it. When I was in computers, I was making $250,000 a year. My ex-husband thought I was absolutely crazy to walk away from that kind of money and go to college and become a starving social worker. And like, my first job fresh out of college paid $27,000 a year, and I was like, "This is a joke, right?" You're kidding. I have all these adult bills.
The price that we have to pay for our calling.
Yes, yes. And so, like, I'm pretty sure he still thinks I'm a little crazy, although now he sees that this is what I was supposed to be. You know, like, I'm living my passion every day. I wake up excited to go to work. I wake up just pumped and energized about what my clients are going to bring to the table today. And when I was in computers, I did great at it, but I was not enthusiastic about the field.
You know, it's a great feeling to get up every day and not do a stitch of work in your life because what you do, you love so much.
And that's what I've told my kids. You know, I've been like, I don't care what you like doing. Do what you love. If you love picking up trash, pick up trash. If you love drawing, draw. Like, don't feel like you need to go out and become an attorney or a doctor in order for me to feel like you're valid. If you're doing what you love, the money will follow.
That's very right. So We spoke about some of the tools that you used as a young adult to deal with your adult trauma. Then you left and you had this career in the military, and then you pivoted and you changed career. Now, over that span of 15 to 20 years, what were some of the other tools that you used to help you overcome your childhood trauma?
Yeah, so in the military, I had a top secret security clearance. So the fact that I had nightmares was a problem. And so they forced me into therapy. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is actually helping.
Wow.
So weird. And so I stayed in therapy in the military. I would have gaps in therapy, like I would move somewhere and it would take me a minute to set up a new therapist or whatever. But I've been in and out of therapy my whole life. I currently have a therapist. I find as a therapist that works in trauma who has come out of trauma, it's important for me to have a safe space to process my own stuff so that I'm not processing my stuff with my clients, which would be horrifying. And
Yes.
and so I usually keep a therapist on board. I have like an intense sense of humor, so I get through life a lot by laughing a lot and by not being afraid to recognize the wounded child, the unnurtured child inside of me. And so I started my second childhood, I want to think I was like 24, 25, probably about the time I had my own daughter. And I go on all the thrill rides, right? I do all the things. I jump in bounce houses, and it's like I want to nurture that child that wasn't nurtured. And anytime I come into a trigger, if I witness a child being abused or I hear about child abuse, I remember to love that child.
That's so important.
Yeah.
Loving
and just
your inner
be
child.
okay. Yeah, be okay with saying to me, none of the adults in your life cared for you, but I care for you, right?
Yeah.
And reassuring that inner child that what happened to her was not okay. And so you have to develop a very real, tangible self-love and love yourself out of it, right? And just say, when I'm crying or I'm emotional about something that happened in my childhood, I just say, I love you so much. You are so strong to have survived that. You shouldn't have had to be that strong, but I'm glad you were. Because, like, I'm looking out my window right now and I see two 14ers, right? And, like, I would be missing out on the joy of the mountains of Colorado if I hadn't loved myself out of this.
And that is so true, Rosalind, because what I hear is that little girl did the best that she could with what she had at the time to bring you to the point where you are today. And I think she did really, really well. And
she did amazing.
That is excellent. She brought you to this point.
She did. And I reassure myself of that all the time. I'm like, man, you kicked it, right? You at 6, 7, 8 years old with no tools, you still got us here. And like, I have all of the tools in the world, and sometimes I don't get it right, and I'm like, wow, like, look at what you were able to do. And I think, like, I tell people all the time, when you tell people that have survived trauma, oh, you're so strong, right?
Yeah.
It sends the wrong message. What we need to be saying to people is, you shouldn't have had to be that strong. These people shouldn't have done this to you. But I'm so glad you did have that strength. I'm so glad that you were able to just hang on for dear life and get through it. And sometimes it's all we can do. All we can do is breathe in and breathe out. and then remind ourselves that our bad day survival rate is 100%.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. So, earlier on we touched on religion, touched on spirituality. I'm curious to know, what was your relationship like with God, having gone through all your trauma, and what does that look like now?
So my relationship with my higher power has been, first off, when I finally get to the day where I get to meet God face to face, I just know he's just going to throw his head back and laugh. Like, he's going to be like, oh, you made it, right? Because we have gone round, him and I, right? Because when I was growing up, everybody kept saying, oh, this is God's plan for your life. And I was like, God needs to hire a planner, because this is not a good plan, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe God needs a woman. I'm not sure, but this is not a good plan. And so there was a lot of bitterness. For a couple of years, I was pretty angry with God. And I was like, look, I get that, like, people have to go through things, but does one person have to go through all of the things? Like, can we evenly distribute the suffering? And it's hard to believe that there's a God that sees everything and that he watches child abuse happen and does nothing to stop it. On the other side of that, now that I've survived and I'm on the other side, it absolutely informs my whole practice, right? I am a better therapist because I can come alongside people and say, I know firsthand what trauma feels like. I know firsthand what trauma looks like. And so I get the bigger picture now. But yeah, there have been times when I've been very close to God, and there are times when I've held God at arm's length. Now I'm out as a lesbian, and so that created some issues with my faith. But I have found a very open and accepting church family here in Colorado, where I live and worship, and I have a very secure faith system. I don't think that it's necessarily in line with every organized Christian faith-based system, but it's in line with what I need from God and what I feel God needs from me, and that's really all that matters is where that is. But I tell people a lot of times, like, I don't know where I would have ended up if I didn't have faith that somebody out there was looking out for me. I don't know that I wouldn't have killed myself. Like, if I would have thought that this earth is the end for us, I don't know that I would have been able to hold on as tight as I was able to. So I'm very grateful to my walk with God for helping me and just for giving me somebody to, like, sit by the river and yell at, right? Like, I would just be like, why, God, why? My dog's looking at me like, you okay? Like, it just that belief that there's something bigger out there was what helped me keep going. It's been beautiful. Very important in my trauma journey to have a belief system.
Yeah. Tell me, you are the director and the therapist at the Open Arms Counseling and Transition Center in Colorado, right?
Yes.
So tell us about the work that you do there.
So part of what we do is we provide services to foster kids who are in the system and emancipating from the system. I actually came up with this concept for this practice when I was 12 and found out that I would be graduating high school homeless. I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this. Like, I have the option of going into the military, but not everybody has that option. Now, the military is not a fit for everybody, and some people have medical conditions and other things that keep them from being able to serve in the military. And you shouldn't feel that your only choice to avoid homelessness is to be willing to die for your country. Like, you should You shouldn't feel like you have to make that sacrifice in order to survive. And so this center has been years and years and years in the making. And what we eventually hope to be offering is we eventually hope to be offering transitional living assistance for kids aging out of foster care, so they can come and live on our campus, utilize our services, therapists, prescribers, financial counseling, educational counseling, and can have like a supportive space to explore what they want their adult lives to look like, instead of just being thrust out without even having well-developed brains, right? Our brains don't finish developing until 26.
Yeah.
So we're throwing 18-year-olds out to the wolves, literally. And so that's part of what we try to do. And then the other part of our practice is the trauma. We provide a trauma-informed practice. We have EMDR therapists. We have regular trauma therapists.
Oh, hi. Who's that little fella? Oh, he's so cute.
Whenever he goes outside, he comes and thanks me for his dog door. He loves his dog door. So
it gives him freedom.
Yeah, he just recently got it. So every time he comes in, he's all like, Mommy, thank you for the dog door. I'm like, okay.
He's very cute.
But yeah, so we do trauma-informed therapy services. We also do regular, just male anxiety, depression, whatever therapy as well. And then we have our foster care side where I want to be eventually with it is I want, once reunification becomes not on the table, once the state determines that this child is not reunifying with their parents, I want them to bring us in so we can start therapy and permanency planning and life planning then. Because foster kids, they don't get asked what they want to be when they grow up.
Yeah.
And so, for some, if you want to be an Olympic figure skater, you've got to start training at 4 years old. You can't start training at 18 when you age out of the system, And so for some of them, these talents and paths that they could take in their life are denied to them just because the system is overwhelmed and overtaxed.
Yeah.
So that's where we want to start coming in and helping. I originally became a social worker because I wanted to fix the system, and then I realized the system doesn't want to be fixed.
Yeah, it's challenging. But also for most of these kids, if I listen to your story, they have bigger things to deal with. Where am I going to find rent? Where am I going to find food? They have the worries that not even some adults have.
I had a kid come in and I was like, so where are we with your credit? How close are we to graduation? And she was like, I spent the night in a park. I don't care about graduation. I don't even know where I'm going to take a shower. And so I was like, you're right. Let's put this aside. Let's fix this. Let's get you somewhere to stay, somewhere to sleep, somewhere to shower. Let's address your absolute survival needs, so then we can focus on your credits, because you're going to graduate. And she did. She graduated.
That is such an amazing story. I was going to ask you about any hope stories, and you do good work. I tell you, Rosalind, you guys do God's work. You do God's work, really.
I tell people all the time, I'm out here doing the Lord's work, and the internet wants to go out on me.
It's what we believe. That's all that matters. Do you have any, in closing, last words of inspiration for the audience?
Yeah, I think, just my closing word would be that, you are in charge of your own life and your own destiny. Don't have to allow these people that have traumatized you to have access to you and your emotional spoons, is what we kind of call them, right? Like, I don't have the spoons to deal with this today. It's okay to say to somebody, you have not been good to me. You have not been kind to me. I don't have the time for this anymore. I have to go live my life. And if it feels like you can't make that choice now, you don't have to make that choice either. Hold on, and you will get there. And then when you do get there, it will be easier to break those ties, to understand that you don't owe these people anything. People, when they're traumatizing you, they have such a power to make you feel hopeless and helpless and make you feel worthless. Once you get out and you establish your worth, you don't have to ever interact with those people again. You don't owe them any of your blood, sweat, and tears. That can be reserved for yourself.
Yeah. And that's how you choose you.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to love you more than you love these people abusing you.
Yeah. So, Rosalind, if any of the listeners would like to reach out and make use of your services, where can they get hold of you?
I have a website, openarmstransitioncenter.org, and you can usually Google me. And email is usually the best way to reach out to me. Or you can always shoot me a text at 720-900-4282, and I usually respond to text. Please, no unsolicited pictures.
Oh,
they will be promptly deleted.
I can't believe the things we have to put up with.
I know. But I just thank you so much for the podcast that you provide. It's such an important message for people.
Thank you so much. I suppose I'm just doing what I love,
Right?
Yeah. And thank you for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure having you.
Yes.
And thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing with the audience and be willing to be this open about your journey. Because I believe that every story of hope will in some way be a survival guide for someone else. And there's someone out there that will take what they need from your story. So thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
And have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. We'll catch up again next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.
That wraps up this podcast episode. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy my podcast, please take a minute to give me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast directory so you don't miss an episode. Please consider following My Centered Life on Facebook and Instagram for daily inspiration. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. You can catch me again in the next episode. Same time, same place. Sending you lots of love and light. Bye.